For Cybercrime Radio, I'm Scott Schober, author of Hacked Again. Joining me today is Amir Boldo, CPTO and co-founder at Above Security, and J.R. Williamson, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at Leidos. This episode is brought to you by Above Security, an AI-native managed insider threat platform for proactive risk management. To learn more about our sponsor, visit above.security. Hey, JR and Amir, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here.
Look forward to a great conversation with you both. Maybe we'll start off first with yourself, Amir. Now, you've said that you started this company 5 years ago. It wouldn't have worked. Why now?
So I believe that 5 years ago, the technology to do real reasoning at scale simply didn't exist. Even 2 years ago, we couldn't establish the above. The problem of insider risk was always known. It was real all the time, but every CISO knew it, but couldn't solve it in a reasonable manner. The problem of solving insider risk always had to be done by human analysts with their human reasoning, and it never scaled. They had to stitch lots of data, and the reasoning cannot scale. So what happened with the change of AI is now with the AI agents, we can actually automate those reasonings and analyze it in real time and stitch the data to come up with the real narrative, to actually understand what is being done. And because of this judgment that AI can do, we were able to establish and found above.
Amir, for most of the industry's history, only a small set of organizations could run a real insider threat program. Why was this so exclusive?
Running a real insider threat program actually meant to put out a real big cross-functional team. You had to put your security team, your HR, your legal, and this is something that you need budget for it. It's Fortune 50 even budget, or to be heavy regulated, and that you must establish those teams. And now, actually, you're able to do it in smaller teams. You can use above, you can do those investigations without the need of those big teams. Till now, it made you be reactive to what happened. A damage was done, and then you had to go look backwards and stitch the logs and all the data that you have in order to understand what happened. Now, even a 1,000-person company can turn on their insider risk program.
Hey, maybe we build on that thought. JR, maybe we can get your thoughts on this as well.
Well, yeah, I think that I'd say, particularly coming out of aerospace and defense company, insider threat is a requirement. I mean, if you run classified programs for the government, you're required to have an insider threat program. It's under the NISPOM conforming change number 2. So that requirement has been in place for quite some time. Now, if you're a commercial company and you're not doing government type of work, then, I think as Mir mentioned, insider threat is kind of a difficult thing to do. And a lot of companies probably don't make that investment to do it. I think this idea around understanding user behavior and to sort of try to catch somebody who's doing something that they shouldn't be doing before they actually do it has been a thing for quite some time. And most of the tooling that we have out there is more oriented to sort of forensic use. After whatever happened has happened, can I prove it? Do I have the data to do it? But as a prevention tool, not so great. And so if we track back to Snowden and situations like that, where, national secrets have been given away, the whole goal behind the NISPOM conforming change number 2 is to get ahead of the threat, or left of theft, if you will, to figure out who are these people likely to be and try to prevent this actual leakage of really important sensitive information. In a commercial world, maybe that's fraud-related data, maybe it's intellectual property, some trade secret. In the classified world, obviously, we're talking about secrets and national security type of implications. So I agree with Amir. This has been a challenge, and AI is definitely a set of technology that can really help us with the predictive side of this.
Now, Amir, we've had insider threat tools for years. DLP stands for Data Loss Prevention, or UEBA, User and Entity Behavior Analytics. What did they miss, in your opinion?
I think they were both built on the same flawed assumption that you can predefine insider risk as a rule or by threshold or baseline over time. DLP, like you said, loss prevention, actually turned insider risk to only data movement problem. And UEBA turned it to a statistical problem. You have a baseline, any deviation from regular baseline behavior is malicious. But behavior isn't static. Someone that does something, an action, let's say downloading a client list or using a new AI tool, it can be innocent on Tuesday, but actually a real problem, a real risk on the company on different day. Deviation from baseline isn't the risk itself. You need to understand the risk and you need to understand whether the action is actually causing some kind of a risk to the company. And I think the category is fractured in lots of point solutions. And in the end, I believe that the problem itself was misdiagnosed as a policy problem instead of a real investigation, something that you need reasoning for.
Now, JR, in your opinion, where does AI come in? Is this about predicting who's going to go rogue?
Well, I think it certainly can help with that. I mean, as we said before, a lot of times this data that we're collecting tends to be more forensic oriented, so it helps us when we conduct an investigation on something that has already happened. And so we use this signal that we've collected around behavior, accesses, websites visited, emails sent, all that kind of stuff. And we sort of put a case together and we come back and say, yep, that was a problem and that person did it, or no, they didn't, or whatever. And here are some collaborators, if you will, or conspirators. But I think the whole idea behind AI is to be able to sort of chew on the data that we're collecting, not just in a forensic way, but a more of a predictive way. Can we model the activity that we're collecting in such a way that we can see patterns in that data that perhaps we couldn't have seen before? And that leads to more predictive kinds of things. And that is really what the Insider Threat Program is all about. From the beginning, it was all about trying to predict where is there going to be a spy? Where is there going to be somebody who is likely to do something ahead of time and then kind of prevent that from actually taking place. So that was the goal, but it's always really hard. I mean, we've got all kinds of different models where we're collecting data around an employee behavior model, a data exfiltration model, the DLP thing you talked about, referrals, disgruntled. Are people unhappy? And when we think about like spies, what is the thing where typical baseline of a productive, happy employee puts you between an upper and lower control limit? But what are the pressures that you could put on them, which would force them out of that range where they might do something that they normally would never do? Counterintelligence. Are they a flight risk? Do they have financial problems that they're dealing with, that are likely to put them in a position where they'll do something that they may not have normally done if everything was just fine? So those models were there to predict behavior. And again, originally around people with clearances who were working on, high side programs, but then of course moved into the unclassified area too. And this whole marketplace really started to swell. And I think to your point, Scott, AI can help with this because instead of just sort of waiting to see if something happened and having that forensic evidence, AI can help us build some of these more effective models beyond the ones that we've been using over the years to really enrich the data understanding and hopefully get us to a place where we could better predict where we might have a problem. Look, behavior is really important here because behavior is typically the indicator that something may go wrong. And if we see that behavior, you might have a friend or a family member who's not acting normal to you. And what do? You typically sort of pull them aside and say, hey, is everything okay? And have a quick conversation. Well, in the workplace, we kind of want to do a similar thing. If that behavior is outside of normal, we really want to understand why, not just to solve these problems around performance, but also just making sure that they're okay, and that the environment that they're working in is conducive to the outcome that we need.
How does that change what an investigation actually looks like day to day?
Well, I think what makes it hard is that we have certainly seen lots of situations where, the data can be used by people for a variety of different purposes. And just because the data shows something doesn't mean that is the reality or that wasn't the intent that the individual has. Sometimes people just make mistakes. Sometimes people employ poor judgment. So it doesn't mean, you get fired. It doesn't mean you get arrested by the FBI. You have to really sort of bring a sense of humanity to bear here and to really look at the data and build sort of a case around intent. And that's hard when you're trying to predict. I'm sure you saw the movie Minority Report and the precogs, and the whole idea was to sort of predict, who's going to go murder somebody, and before they actually do it, you arrest them. Well, wouldn't that be great if that actually worked? And unfortunately, we've seen this in situations around insider threat cases too, where all the indicators are looking like something really bad's going to happen here. And then as you investigate and you pull those threads, turns out to be a nothing burger. But the intent is to do just that. And I think where AI can really help is build on the efficacy of these predictive models. We've been collecting data for years, and to use these things to find better patterns, create what if scenarios, and then try to sort of not just find a needle in a haystack, but find a needle in a bunch of needles, a bad needle. And then when that happens, proactively go investigate, go have a conversation, but do it with humanity in mind, not with this assumption that you're guilty, but to really investigate with the idea that, hey, are these leading indicators going to create a high probability of risk for your company? And if they are, take action on those. But be very clear, it could be false. It may not be correct.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
Insider risk requires seeing the end game, not just your next move. But your SIM, DLP, and UEBA are all stuck on the opening. Above Security's Arbiter is your fleet of 24/7 AI investigative analysts focused on behavior and intent, not noise. We understand what actually happened and why. That's AI-powered, human-centric security. Stop reacting, start preventing. Visit above.security or catch Aviv and Amir on the Insider Scoop here on Cybercrime Radio.
And now, back to the podcast.
Amir, there's an obvious worry here. An AI passing judgment on employees. From your perspective, how do you keep this from becoming surveillance?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And to JR point, we start from the premise that most inside the risk is a trusted person. It's not a villain. It's someone that did an unsafe for a reason that made sense, like an unsafe action for something that made sense to the person. So this is the first step, I would say. The AI isn't judging in the end. There is always human in the loop. So the AI is doing I would say, the legwork or gathering the evidence, building the timeline, and it does it much better than a human being. Human beings are very good in storytelling, but they aren't good, or they are very terrible in, I would say, stitching and holding hundreds of disconnected events across weeks, months. And in the end, the story around inside the risk can take a long time to stitch. And this is what AI is good at. It's good at doing the legwork. It's good in building the timeline. It's good at reasoning about the context and what happened. But in the end, there is always human in the loop. So like JR said, the AI is flagging the behavior, is flagging the risk. It can give suggestions, but he never does the final decision. For above, the human in the loop, it's not a compliance checkbox. It's by design in the whole process. And I would also argue that using AI makes the inside the risk even more fair. It's not less. It's consistent, it's evidence-based. It brings the full timeline into the human to, in the end, to do the final decision.
Looking forward, Amir, what's the thing most programs aren't ready for, in your opinion?
I believe that AI is here to help solve the problem, but it's also the thing that changes the whole world. So companies are deploying AI agents across everything. It's searching data, it's moving files, in doing operations on behalf of the humans in the organization. So one thing that needs to change is our perception of what AI is, and Till now, we actually called it automation, but it was always an AI and automation within the company was always an insider. In the past, the definition was, let's say, a person with a badge. Now it needs to be wider. It needs to include those automations and AI tools. So this reasoning-based approach that we've built within our solution as well takes into account the agents themselves, takes into account the human, and looks at them in the same manner. This is an identity within the network or within the organization that does operation and can potentially cause harm and risk. So I think it's a real shift in the mindset of all those inside risk programs that need to change, to evolve.
Maybe from your perspective, JR, 5 years out, what does good look like?
I think the plethora of AI tools are going to be coming out in a way that helps the defenders, the folks who are actually looking for these problems for sure, as we've discussed. But honestly, these AI tools can help the attacker too and the insider in the sense that these tools could be used in using natural language processing to say, hey, who is likely causing this type of behavior, around key programs or critical IP or transformations, but they can also sort of see what the organization knows about them, so it can actually help them hide a little bit or to develop an attack plan that, quite frankly, might fly under the radar, so the AI can assist an insider in addition to AI being used to discover the insider. And so both of those need to kind of be explored. And I think as defenders, you need to sort of work through that. The other thing I would say is everything, of course, is going very agentic and this idea that we're introducing more autonomy. And autonomy and human in the loop tends to be autonomy plus human on the loop, not necessarily always in the loop. And that's going to be something we're going to have to address too. And as the agency that we give the agents, particularly personal agents that we're going to use, they go off and start doing things on our behalf. All of a sudden, we look like we're threats, but it's really the agent that's doing the work. So we are going to have to be able to correlate on that very closely, Scott. So we're going to have to know that it was the agent who did this behavior on my behalf versus it was JR doing this behavior, as JR. And we're going to have to be really clear about the identities and the permissions that we assign to these agents so that these insider threat programs can continue to operate effectively. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a really squirrely space where people are going to claim it wasn't me, it was the agent, it wasn't my fault, I didn't do it, kind of a thing. And forensically, we're going to have to be able to prove without a shadow of a doubt that this is what happened, when it happened, and by whom.
Great conversation, both of you. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, JR.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, JR.
You're welcome. Thank you.
For Cybercrime Radio, I'm Scott Schober, author of Hacked Again. This episode is brought to you by Above Security, an AI-native managed insider threat platform for proactive risk management. To learn more about our sponsor, visit above.security. For more of our media, visit our website at cybersecurityventures.com.